Welcome to the 6th century Anno Domini, the 100 years that proved empires don't stay buried when they're killed by people who refuse to admit they're murderers. This is the century when barbarian kings became more obsessed with Roman legitimacy than Augustus ever was, when a peasant's nephew conquered half the Mediterranean while speaking Latin with a Balkan accent, and when the ghost of Rome became more powerful than Rome had ever been while alive. Here are 10 mind-blowing facts about the century that turned the graveyard of empires into the world's most successful resurrection story. Fact number 1. A Byzantine emperor reconquered the West using an army of 15,000 men. Justinian I looked at a map in 527 Anno Domini and decided that the Eastern Roman Empire wasn't Roman enough. The real Roman Empire needed to include Rome and Carthage and everything else the barbarians had stolen. This was ambitious thinking from a man whose entire expeditionary force numbered fewer people than had attended a decent chariot race. Justinian's grand reconquest began with the most audacious military campaign in history. He sent 15,000 men to reconquer North Africa from the Vandals. The expedition was led by Belisarius, a general so competent that he defeated the entire Vandal kingdom in 2 battles, captured Carthage, and shipped the Vandal king back to Constantinople as a trophy, all within a single campaigning season. Justinian immediately ordered Belisarius to do it again in Italy, with essentially the same 15,000 men, against the Ostrogothic kingdom that controlled the entire peninsula. Belisarius accomplished this by understanding something Roman generals had forgotten. He didn't need to defeat barbarian armies. He just needed to convince Roman populations that legitimate imperial authority had returned. City after city opened its gates because inhabitants wanted to be Romans again. The mind-blowing part: it worked. For 20 years, Byzantine armies controlled Italy, North Africa, and parts of Spain with laughably small forces. They succeeded because they were fighting to restore something people still believed in. Fact number 2. A plague killed 1/3 of the Mediterranean world, and nobody mentions it. The plague of Justinian, beginning in 541 Anno Domini, was one of history's most devastating pandemics. It killed an estimated 40 million people across the Mediterranean world, and somehow managed to become the most forgotten catastrophe of the ancient world. The plague arrived in Constantinople via grain ships from Egypt, carried by infected rats. Procopius estimated 10,000 people were dying daily in the capital at the pandemic's peak. The city stacked corpses in towers, then loaded them onto ships to dump at sea. The plague spread along trade routes, devastating urban populations with no immunity. Rome's population crashed further. Cities across recently reconquered North Africa found themselves ruling empty streets. Most importantly, the plague ended Justinian's reconquest before it could be consolidated. His armies in Italy began dying faster than they could be reinforced. The Ostrogoths, on the verge of defeat, found themselves fighting Byzantine forces literally melting away from disease. The plague also devastated the Persian Empire, creating a power vacuum that would eventually be filled by Arab armies united under Islam. Modern estimates suggest it killed between 1/4 and 1/3 of the Mediterranean's population, a demographic catastrophe comparable to the Black Death, but occurring when record-keeping was less systematic. Fact number 3. The Ostrogoths became more Roman than the Romans and still lost. Theodoric the Great made barbarian rule of Italy work better than Roman rule had. For 30 years, he governed using a brilliant hybrid system. Goths lived under Gothic law and served in the military. Romans lived under Roman law and served in civilian administration. Under Theodoric, Rome's aqueducts were repaired for the first time in decades. Roads were rebuilt. The Senate regained dignity. Classical literature was preserved in scriptoriums he funded personally. Most remarkably, Theodoric's court became the most genuinely classical place in Europe. While Byzantine emperors were Christian autocrats, the Ostrogothic court maintained Roman ceremonies, Latin literature, and classical education. His court was more Roman than Constantinople. But Theodoric was an Arian Christian ruling Catholic Romans during an era when religious orthodoxy was becoming politically essential. When Justinian launched his reconquest, he framed it as religious war. Catholic Romans chose orthodoxy over competent governance. The Ostrogothic kingdom fell not because it failed politically, but because it was theologically incorrect. By 553 Anno Domini, it was extinct, and Italy was a devastated Byzantine province that never achieved the prosperity it had enjoyed under barbarian kings. Fact number 4. The Franks invented France by accident, while trying to be Roman. Clovis I made the smartest political decision of the 6th century when he converted to Catholic Christianity around 496 Anno Domini. He thought he was securing church alliance and legitimizing his rule. Instead, he accidentally created the template for medieval European monarchy. Unlike other barbarian groups, the Franks had conquered Roman territory without ever being part of the Roman system. This independence let Clovis experiment with new legitimacy forms. Instead of claiming to be a Roman official, he presented himself as a Christian king, ruling all subjects equally under divine authority. Clovis's conversion to Orthodox Christianity was strategically brilliant. Most barbarian kings were Arian heretics. Clovis became the only Orthodox Christian barbarian king, gaining immediate legitimacy with Roman populations and church support. The conversion also justified conquering other barbarian kingdoms. When he attacked the Visigoths, he framed it as crusade against heresy. By 507 Anno Domini, Clovis controlled most of Gaul and had established a new model of post-Roman kingship based on divine right rather than Roman appointment. The Franks succeeded where others failed because they stopped trying to be Roman and started being something new. By century's end, Francia was Western Europe's most stable kingdom, owing its success to abandoning rather than embracing Roman traditions. Fact number 5. Byzantine emperors spoke Greek, lived in Asia, and insisted they were Roman. By 600 Anno Domini, the Eastern Roman Empire had completed its transformation into something unrecognizable to Augustus. Yet Byzantine emperors called themselves Emperor of the Romans until Constantinople fell in 1453. The transformation was complete. Official language changed from Latin to Greek. The capital was in Asia. Military system was based on themes rather than legions. The emperor wasn't princeps, but basileus, absolute monarch ruling by divine appointment, literally worshipped as God's representative. Yet Byzantines insisted they were the same empire that had conquered Gaul. They maintained legal continuity with Roman law, claimed authority over Western territories lost for centuries, and regarded barbarian kingdoms as illegitimate usurpers. This wasn't propaganda. Byzantines genuinely believed they were Romans. Their historians wrote about classical Rome as their heritage. Their lawyers studied Justinian's code as living law. Their generals planned campaigns based on maps showing territories lost 2 centuries earlier. When crusaders arrived in Constantinople centuries later, they were surprised to discover Byzantines considered themselves legitimate Roman heirs and regarded Western Europeans as barbarians, squatting on rightfully Roman territory. Fact number 6. The Pope became more powerful than emperors by actually governing. Pope Gregory I transformed the papacy from prestigious but marginal position into Western Europe's most powerful office through the revolutionary strategy of doing the job everyone expected emperors to do. When Gregory became pope in 590, Italy was chaos. Byzantine reconquest had devastated the peninsula. New barbarian Lombards were conquering Justinian's territories. Imperial administration was corrupt and ineffective. Gregory decided if emperors wouldn't govern, popes would. He organized Rome's defense, negotiated with barbarian kings, administered famine relief, and established diplomatic relations. He began issuing imperial decrees, appointing governors, collecting taxes, and organizing military campaigns. The Byzantines were too weak to stop this papal usurpation. The Lombards found it convenient negotiating with a pope who controlled territory rather than Byzantine officials who only controlled fortified cities. Gregory also revolutionized Christian missions, organizing Anglo-Saxon conversion in Britain under direct papal authority. By his death in 604, the Pope had become Central Italy's de facto ruler and Western Europe's most influential political figure. Fact number 7. A peasant's nephew conquered the known world. Justinian I rose from rural Balkan obscurity to rule the most powerful empire on earth. His uncle Justin was an illiterate peasant who somehow became emperor through palace coups involving substantial bribery. Justinian's obsession was legitimacy. He was the first emperor in over a century who wasn't a military usurper or barbarian general. His answer to what emperors should do was characteristically ambitious: rule the entire Roman Empire, enforce uniform Christian orthodoxy, and create eternal legal systems. His legal scholars compiled centuries of Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis, which became European legal systems' foundation for 1,000 years. He built more than any emperor since Augustus. The Hagia Sophia was the world's largest enclosed space for nearly a millennium. Yet Justinian's reign was marked by constant warfare, religious persecution, and fiscal crisis. His reconquest campaigns consumed enormous resources and ultimately failed to create stable Western control. When he died in 565, the empire was larger but more fragile than ever. Fact number 8. The Mediterranean stopped being Roman. By 600 Anno Domini, the Mediterranean was no longer a Roman lake. For the first time in 7 centuries, no single power controlled the crucial trade routes connecting Europe, Africa, and Asia. The Byzantine Empire controlled the east but tenuously. Persians conquered Syria and threatened Egypt. Slavs overran the Balkans. In the west, Franks controlled southern Gaul. Visigoths ruled Spain. Lombards conquered Byzantine Italy. Economic unity was breaking down. Egyptian grain no longer fed Rome or Constantinople. Spanish silver no longer financed imperial armies. Trade routes that had functioned for centuries were disrupted by warfare and fragmentation. Cultural unity fragmented faster than political control. Latin became mutually unintelligible dialects. Greek retreated to the eastern Mediterranean. Germanic languages established themselves as administrative languages in northern Europe. The ancient world was becoming the medieval world, not one civilization centered on an inland sea, but competing kingdoms sharing common heritage while evolving in different directions. Fact number 9. Christian missionaries succeeded where Roman armies failed. Christianity conquered barbarian peoples faster and more thoroughly than Rome ever had. The Visigoths who sacked Rome in 410 were Christians by 450. Vandals in North Africa maintained Roman legal systems and built Roman-style churches. Franks converted en masse and became protectors of Catholics against Arian heretics. This wasn't forced conversion, but voluntary cultural adoption. Barbarian kings discovered Christianity gave them legitimacy with Roman subjects, access to church administrative networks, and alliance with the post-Roman world's most powerful institution. The church adapted to barbarian rule with remarkable flexibility. Bishops learned Germanic languages, incorporated barbarian customs into church law, and developed monasticism appealing to warrior cultures. By centuries' end, Christianity had spread further into northern and eastern Europe than Roman armies had ever penetrated. The barbarians hadn't destroyed Christian civilization. They had become its most enthusiastic promoters. Fact number 10. Rome died, but Romans lived forever. The most mind-blowing fact is that empires can become immortal by dying at exactly the right moment. The Western Roman Empire collapsed so completely that it became impossible to imagine Europe without it. By 600, Anno Domini, at least 6 groups claimed to be Rome's legitimate heirs. Byzantines claimed institutional continuity. Franks claimed divine appointment. The Pope claimed spiritual authority. Germanic kings claimed legal authority through Roman titles. The Church claimed cultural authority through Latin literacy. And ordinary people lived under recognizably Roman laws, languages, and customs. The fragmentation actually strengthened Roman cultural influence. Instead of one empire that might fall, there were dozens of kingdoms all needing Roman legitimacy. Roman law became more influential after the empire fell, because it was the only legal system transcending tribal customs. Latin became more important as a unifying force, because it was the only language educated Europeans shared. Christianity became more Roman as it spread beyond Roman territory, because it needed classical learning to compete with pagan philosophies. Rome became immortal by dying completely enough to be reinvented by each subsequent generation. The 6th century was when this process began, when Rome stopped being a place and started being an idea that would shape European civilization for the next 1,000 years. 600 out. The empire was dead. Long live the empire. Again.